day, wherever you may be. How you doing? Welcome to another episode of ArmTalk. I am your host, Jody Williams, and today the topic is it's what everybody's been talking about, right? It was the Las Vegas event, vendetta style, the reffing, all that kind of good stuff. We're going to talk about the reffing and the rules. Is it good? Is it bad? Whatever. However, I got someone who can really break it down because my guest today is none other than Sean Hancock, who, by the way, victorious in his match. Sean, welcome to the show again.
Hey, brother, how you doing? I'm glad to be here. Glad to have you. I tell you, we're going to pour right into this whole topic on fouls and what's good for the sport, bad for the sport. I've been reading everybody's, little stuff on social media about how it's going to kill the sport having rules, and that's just, to me, it's ludicrous. And give me a minute. So, all right. So if you don't know who I am, the people out there listening, I was the guy, the downside ref for the Matt Mask fight, where I double fouled Matt Alec on micro fouls, on micro elbow fouls, whatever a micro foul is. All right, so my reason for being here is just to educate U.S. arm wrestlers on the sport. It's mainly the new guys that disagree with the rule set. And yeah, that's even Bowen. Bowen's relatively new to the sport. And they just don't get it. So arm wrestling is 82 countries worldwide. It's right. The most sport on the planet. Arm wrestling is the largest sport in many of these countries. It's known as a real professional sport. All of these countries that it's known as a real sport, they all have one thing in common. That's the standards and the rigid rule system. Right. For any sport to be considered a real sport, there must be standards and rules that are followed by all professional sports have this. Take football, for example. Have you ever seen a referee say, "Oh, that's just a small horse collar"? There was no advantage gained, so we'll just let that one go.
Right.
You don't see things like that in any professional sport. So why do you expect to see it in arm wrestling? And will arm wrestling grow with a rigid rule system? I think we can directly relate arm wrestling to the sport of MMA. MMA's been around for about a century in the U.S. It was always an underground sport. People didn't know about it. If you heard about MMA, you got the same thing like you hear about arm wrestling. Oh, that's a real thing. I mean, we've all heard that dozens of times, So MMA was an underground sport like arm wrestling until a group of investors took the sport. They applied standards and rules to create what we now know as the UFC. So it wasn't the lax rules that made MMA the UFC, it was the rigid rules that they have, that you go in there, you watch the referees in those fights, and they go by a certain standard. They don't let anything slide. If it's a foul, it's a foul.
Right.
So years ago, I was asked by several American orgs whenever I chose to go with the PAL as my, preferred org to work with. I had mostly every other American org came to me. It's like, why? Basically acting like I was a traitor to America. Like, why would you choose a European org over an American org? We all have all these American orgs here. Why don't you just come in here and help us make the sport better with an American org? My answer was real easy. I mean, that was an easy question to answer. So you got all these orgs in the U.S., and most of them do not have a rigid rule system. And if anything was ever going to happen here in the U.S., it would have already happened under these orgs. So that was my answer. Reason I went with PAL, because they do have those standards and the rules. I've been over to Poland and places in Europe to where arm wrestling is a real professional sport over there. I've seen our athletes walk down the road and people come up off the street and say, "Hey, can I get your picture? Can I get your autograph?" They recognize our American athletes over there in Europe. But just like, we would recognize a football player walking down the street. That's how it is in Europe. That's the way that I want it to be here. So I use I'm from the South. We have a lot of peanut farms here. Right. And if you want to be a good peanut farmer, you're going to evolve. You're going to watch what other peanut farmers are doing. You're going to go with what they're doing. If you're just now starting out and you see a peanut farmer over here, he's using the old traditional methods, of fertilizer with chicken shit and everything, and he's making a little bit of money. But then you see this other peanut farmer over here, and he's doing everything that, the right way. He's making the most money. Okay. He's doing it the way that you want to do it. That's kind of like the PAL. That's what I looked at. I looked at all the orgs. I'm like, PAL is where it's at. That's what I want to bring to the states. And unfortunately, or fortunately, PAL is set up with standards and strict rules. And to me, that's what you have to be a professional sport, or we're never going to be known as a professional sport. It's been proven. There's many other orgs that don't abide by the standards or rigid rules. The WAL poured all kinds of money and time into that concept, and it still didn't work.
Right.
Like other professional sports, standards and rigid rules work. Even in arm wrestling, it's just been proven overseas that the rigid rules and standards work there to make it a professional sport. That's what we have to have here for it to be a professional sport. And if you don't know the rules, you reach out to me and I'll send you a set of the rules. But there is no such thing as a micro foul. It just doesn't exist. If it's a foul, it's a foul. If we see it, there might be things that we don't see, that we miss. Like I might miss an elbow foul, but if I call an elbow foul, I call an elbow foul because I saw it. I saw daylight between the tip of the elbow and the pad, or either the tip went beyond the perimeter of the pad. I'm not going to call a foul on anybody that didn't exist.
Right. Here's the thing. Different organizations have different set of rules, right? Now, I've been pulling for 12 years. This is year number 12 for me. And, a lot of us in that era grew up with the rules we're doing right now, with the PAL, IFA, WAF rules. Those were the rules we were accustomed to. The guys now who have been in the sport for like 3-4 years at most have probably came about the wall thing. Now, the wall rules, right? Yes, I admit that's probably made for TV. Not a problem with that. The running fouls, I get all that. It has its place everywhere. I'm okay with the running fouls. However, with the wall thing, the PAL, whatever the rules we got using right now, it makes the puller pull in control, right? And every time this topic comes up, the one person I always use as example is Marcio Barboza. Now, I'm not picking on him, but this was 2018, maybe 2019. And I remember he pulled his last, WAL match. He's under that format. Elbow fouls, okay, keep pulling until you win, to restart, all that kind of stuff. Well, later that year, that fall, he pulled in Nemiroff, okay? Now, Nemiroff, pulls the same rule set as PAL, where they're real strict. And when I got word and everybody else got word that Marcio was going down there to Poland, I'm thinking, cool, he's going to kick everyone's ass.
Yep.
Come to find out, he elbow fouled twice. It was losing all elbow fouls. And I'm thinking, well, maybe the fact that because he's so into WAL, that all of a sudden, boom, you change to WAF rules is a little different. And, for me, it eliminates all the sloppiness, because if you're sloppy, they're going to call you on it, then you're going to be out. Thanks for coming. And God forbid you drive a far distance to compete. But, my thought is this. If you tell me, wasn't there a meeting or whatever where all the pullers understood the rules? Yes or no?
Well, that's just the thing about PAL. Typically there is a meeting with vendettas or super matches, and whenever I went and over in Texas, where they're not known what their rule set is, and it was a John Brzezinski and Katchen fight, and before that fight, I got with them and I said, look, this is strict. We're rigid rules. I'm IFA ref, PAL ref, a strict rule. Just make sure they knew it, but. That's the great thing about coming to a PAL tournament. These guys, they've been pulling for years and years and years. Matt Mass has pulled PAL. So Breslin obviously has. He's a PAL top 8. So when you come to a PAL tournament, you automatically know, hey, we're pulling under the PAL umbrella, so we know what we're getting. We're getting the rigid rules. There wasn't a specific meeting saying, hey guys, this is a PAL tournament, we're going to be pulling by rigid rules. However, they all knew there is a PAL tournament and it was a rigid rules, and nobody complained about that. Nobody No, nobody came back and said later on, oh, I didn't know the rules. Matter of fact, I mean, Matt was pretty fucking pissed when it happened, excuse my language.
Right.
But later on back, and he said, you know what? He said, I get it. It was a PAL tournament. I knew what I was getting into. He said, next time, he said, this will make for a better rematch. He said, I just need to learn to keep my elbow down. I mean, he wasn't mad, and he knew what the rules were. And I mean, unfortunately, he broke the rules, and he got some fouls called on him. I hate that. I hate to see fights end that way. But again, I mean, we're a PAL tournament. We're going to consistently stay with rigid rules. And when you come to a PAL tournament, that's what you're going to get. It's not going to fit everyone. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people that don't want to go with rigid rules. But you know what? Here in the States, we have like 12 freaking orgs you can go pull for. There's a lot of loose orgs. But what's going to happen there is you are going to get screwed by somebody, because the rules aren't the same. You don't know what the rules are. The rules are kind of being made up as they go. Or the huge thing with having loose rules is injuries. I mean, back in 2017, I was in Vegas at WAL tournament, and there was like 5 arm breaks. There was multiple torn pec muscles. There were 5 arm breaks in one tournament.
Right.
For under a tournament that had loose rules. It's not just the keeping things fair for us to have rigid rules. A lot of it is the safety factor. If we start seeing somebody get in a bad position, we're going to stop the fight. We're going to issue a foul. We're going to correct and make sure they don't get in that position again, and we're going to restart it. If it was under the loose rules, WAL, they're just going to say, oh, this is a running. Well, actually, it's not even a foul for a bad position that I know of in WAL, but even if it was, it'd be a running foul. So, okay, well, this guy's in a terrible arm break position, but it's just a running foul, so let's just let it keep on going until pop, and somebody has to go to the hospital.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but yeah, that's what you're doing. You're not doing anything for your competitors. If the competitors are wanting to compete on a higher level, like worlds or nationals or any international event, they're all going to have the rigid rules. All of them do. That's the constant with international events, with national championships, with world championships. They all have rigid rules, no matter what org you're gonna try to pull with. So whenever you're going to these tournaments, or these promoters are putting on tournaments and they have loose rules, where you're actually hurting your athlete, because when they go to the next level to pull, that's what's going to happen. They're going to get fouled out. I had a conversation with Leonard the other day where he said, they used to have a good concept for super matches. They had kind of a loose rule. Well, if there was an elbow foul, as long as it didn't gain an advantage, they let it keep on going. They used to do that in the USAA, but so they were doing that, and the American athletes were all used to that type of reffing. Well, then they took a team up to the Canadian Nationals, and U.S. got their butts kicked because they were getting fouled out under that. So Leonard said when they were coming back, they were driving back, the whole group of the referees, and he said, we're serving a disadvantage to our athletes by not making them adhere to the rules here in the United States, because then when we go somewhere else, we get our butts kicked. So they took that concept completely away. Was it a more fun super match to watch by not having to stop? Maybe, yeah, you got to see it, but still, you're doing your athletes a disadvantage. And also, I mean, it's just too great of a risk for injury when you let something go on like that without stopping it.
And that's the thing. And this is where a lot of people disagree with me, and I'm okay with that. I got tough skin. This is where people jump on me. Here's my opinion, and I want to get your thoughts. Doesn't matter what tournament you go to, doesn't matter what organization you go to or what rule set there is, it's up to the puller. It's their responsibility to know where your elbow is at all times. It's not the referee's responsibility. It's your elbow. It's your responsibility. So if you're in the back of the pad, you got to know it's your responsibility that, hey, if I drag back any closer, I'm going to get dinged for an elbow. If I go to hit somebody real hard, my elbow slightly comes up, then that's my responsibility. That's on me, not the ref. And I think sometimes the ref they get yelled at for that. Because I know for a fact I've done that. I'm a certified ref under the USAA banner. Leonard, I went to the Leonard School of Arm Wrestling or whatever. So I know exactly what goes on. And people tell me, hey, man, that was the elbow foul. It just came up a bit. I'm like, I understand, but it came up. That's the bottom line. You know, we were trained to, like, especially as a down ref, don't worry about the pin. You worry about the elbows from there. That's the whole purpose of having a down ref. That down ref is responsible to look at the elbows, let the head ref worry about the pin, because he sees an angle you don't see because you're down looking at the elbows. That's where you're focused at. You have a better look as a down ref. You have a better angle at watching elbows than the head ref does, unless it's obvious. Just like, do you agree?
Yeah, that's on the go. That's on the go. When for ready go, because the head ref's up top, and he's got he's trying to get their hands aligned. So the head ref's up top. He didn't have the vantage point for watching elbows as well as the down ref does at that point. So on the ready go, down ref watches elbows only. As soon as the head ref gets in place, then it's kind of back and forth. If the winning side moves over to the down ref, then the down ref's gaze will leave the elbows and go towards the hand. He's primarily looking for pins at that point, and then the head looking at elbows. And then when the hands position back over to the winning side of the head rail, then it switches back and forth. But they're always trying to keep an outside view of everything that's going on. You know, they're looking for shoulders, they're looking for the chins passing over the center, they're looking for all kind of different infractions. But as far as a rule set goes, it goes back and forth after the ready go, who's looking at primarily at elbows versus pins, and it may be the head ref or it may be the down ref, depending on which side the hands are on, what winning side it's on. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And like I said, and this is where you have to know, and like Tim Breslin, he knows, like, you know what, this style, this format fits me. It fits Tim. He's been doing this, you know, these rules set for years. So when he goes to a different tournament and it's a little wackadoo, then it's like, okay, it makes it feel kind of uncomfortable. He's even admit that, you know. And like I said, if for those pros out there that want to go to the next level, to say, hey, I want to be able to compete at an IFA Worlds one day, or, you know, WAF Worlds or whatever, these are the rule sets you got to get used to if you plan on competing at that level. That's just my opinion. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you first off, as an athlete, you need to know the rule set of the tournament that you're going to.
Right.
And it really doesn't matter after that. If you choose to go to a tournament that has a rigid rule set, then it just comes down to, is the referee actually doing his job? If the referee's calling fouls, if he's not missing things, is he actually doing his job? Doing their job, it really doesn't matter what rule set you go to. If you go to a WAL tournament, as long as you understand what their rules are and the referee's doing their job, you can't get pissed off at the ref, depending on the outcome of the match. You know, if you fouled, whatever happened on you, it's on the competitor all the way around, because he needs to know what rule set of a tournament he's going to before he goes there. He needs to know what caliber referees. If I see a tournament that's got people pulled out of the crowd reffing, because they didn't have enough reps to come to it. If I see that, guess what? Next year, I'm not going to that tournament, because I know there's a good chance of me getting screwed. The refs aren't going to be doing their jobs because they really don't know the rule set. But it's a twofold thing. I mean, the athletes need to know what rule set they're competing under, and then they need to know that they have qualified referees there to actually do their job and ref in a manner that coincides with the rule set of the tournament they're pulling in. So, I don't know. I just, again, I'm going to always go back to, we have to have a rigid rule for to become a real sport. And the reason I'm going to hammer that home again and again is because I look at every other professional sport. There's no professional sport on this planet that has loose rules.
Right.
So how are you going to take the sport of arm wrestling and say loose rules is the only way to grow the sport? Why is the sport of arm wrestling the only sport? Why is it so much different than every other sport? It's not. It's just like every other sport. I mean, you're not. See, the only way that arm wrestling is going to grow is with sponsors.
Yep.
Okay. And the main way to gain sponsors is to not put on a shit show. So when you have referees out there and there's all kind of stuff going on, and it's just you don't have proper standards, you don't have the correct rules, there's a lot of injuries, there's a lot of contention, there's a lot of bitching going on back and forth. You have a sponsor out there and he's watching that, he's like, this is not a show I want to watch. And I mean, I go all over the country hosting tournaments, and whenever I go to say, like for instance, Nashville, I'm fixing to host one there in October, but I went there a few months ago just to scout Nashville, just to see if they may be interested in us, to try to find a venue. And just like Nashville, I get this about everywhere I travel to, and I start talking about the sport of arm wrestling. As soon as I start talking about it, they're looking at me a little funny. They're like, you want to bring that here? And the reason that arm wrestling has a stigma of like a barroom brawl type of thing. You know, you're going to bring these bunch of rough, rowdy, hollering, cussing, fighting, barroom type people to my place. No, we don't want you. So before I even let them speak, I have to prove to them that we're a professional tournament. We're a professional organization. You know, we're not going to be cussing, fighting, tearing your shit up. You know, we're a professional deal. So I have to have all of my ducks in a row just to prove to them that we're a professional organization before they'll even let us have a tournament at their place. And that's the same way that the sponsors look at us. They look at us the same way. No, we don't want to be involved with that group right there because they're going to bring our brand down. So for us to get their attention, we have to prove to them that we're going to give some value to their brand. We're not going to do that by having something that looks sloppy or unprofessional.
Right.
Standards again. PAL has set standards for the sport down to where the chalk bucket needs to be. Yeah. Standard. I mean everything, because they're setting standards for the sport. Again, I'll go back to football. You look at football. The referees every referee in the NFL wears the same type of shoe. Every football is the same type of football. Every strike, it looks exactly the same on the referee. Everything's exactly the same across the board in the NFL. And that's the same with any sport. Everything is exactly the same. They have complete standards. And that's what that's what I'm trying to get to with the PAL. I want whenever somebody comes to a PAL tournament, every ref's dressed exactly the same. They got dress code. They're all dressed to the nines. They're doing their jobs right. The chalk bucket's down on the floor, away from the table. Everything's refed in a manner to which it should be refed with master refs and senior refs only. Everything's done in that professional manner, just like it is in Europe, because that's how we get the attention of the sponsors. And without sponsors, we're just not going to grow.
And since we're talking about rules, I have to ask you this, because the other aspect of the rules and all that kind of stuff, it goes back to what Devin Lara's been spitting out. And again, this is nothing personal against Devin, but I think when they're complaining about, oh, we should go right to the straps. Now, I know anybody out there, live chat, no, I want you guys' opinions about this. Everyone will try as a puller to get some kind of advantage. I get that, but we've all pulled where, hey, you have to earn, quote unquote, to get into the strap. You don't just sort of walk up and go, let's go in the strap. Mm-hmm. To the point where there are some people out there who purposely slip and made that a strategy just so they can get into the straps. What are your thoughts on that?
I call them professional cheats. I'm a pretty big advocate of, professional cheats, in my opinion. And I mean, I'm a referee and I may get roasted for this, but if you're not cheating, you're not trying. That's knowing the sport. You need to, if you want to be involved in sport, you really want to be good at the sport, know the sport, know the rules inside and out. The reason I became a referee to begin with wasn't because I wanted to referee. I love it, man. I'm really, really serious in it. But the reason I wanted to be a referee, I went to the seminar the first time just so I could learn the rules, so I would know what kind of cheats I can get away with. So it would make me a better puller. And becoming a referee up there, watching what everybody's doing, that has really made me a lot better athlete, becoming a referee, just so I know what I can and can't get away with. Now, as far as the slips, it's tricky. There are professional slips. You do it on purpose, but as long as you do it in a legal manner, and that I'll go back to the same way that's done in football, that's done in any other sport. Every other sport, those athletes, they know the rules, they know what they can and can't get away with, and they're going to push the limits. They're going to find little ways to tweak it. They're going to find ways to cheat, but do it legally, if that makes any sense. I agree with it. I think it's a lot of strategy. You're not going to get away from it. You can say this right now, talking about just the slips, but that's in any other thing. There's about almost every rule in the sport of arm wrestling, or just about every rule in MMA or football or soccer, there's a way to cheat that rule. And that's just becoming a more knowledgeable athlete, is knowing how to cheat that rule legally. Me, myself, I love the straps. I'm a strap puller. I know how to slip legally. So if you go on the other side of the table with me, you don't agree to a strap with me, 99% of the time, I'm going to at least try to slip you legally.
Oh, I know that firsthand, Sean.
Right. Exactly. But on the other end, as the defensive guy on the other side of the table for me, if he knows, and see, I'm known for a slipper. I'm known for wanting the straps, and I'm known for wanting to slip. So he knows that going in. So he's got a strategy set up for me to keep me from slipping. See, whenever I do something to try to slip, it immediately puts me at a disadvantage. If I'm not successful with my slip, I'm at a huge disadvantage, and he is at a huge advantage. So that's this part's to know on each side of it. Know the guys that you're pulling, know the rules, know the offensive moves, the counter moves. If somebody's coming up there just to slip, that doesn't mean they're automatically going to slip and get a strap. You can take that to your advantage. If you're not a strap puller and you want to pull without a strap, then know that he's going to try to slip, and use his slip technique to your advantage. Catch his damn thumb and dump his hand down. It's really, really hard for somebody to come back from that, because you're not in a good positive position anymore. I've seen a couple of people. Leonard's told me how he used to be a really good puller trying to slip. He would always keep himself in a positive position, but I've never been able to do it. I have not found a way yet how to, if I get caught and I'm not able to slip and I'm still in a positive position, I'm always in a bad position. If I try to slip and I'm not successful with it, I'm in a terrible position.
Right. Well, like I said, and another thing I want to touch about, and I know we talk about it over and over again, but this is where, as a ref, I still struggle with, and I want to get your opinions. Because now more and more people now are adapting, and I'll use that word loosely, adapting the King's move, where at what point do you go, hey, stand up? Is it because if you're in a positive position, it's okay to hang out, in water skis, so to speak, whereas if you're in a losing position, then you have to stand up. Help me out, because like I said, as a down ref, and sometimes reffing like local events, and somebody wanted to pull that card, I need to know, because I'm so paranoid of somebody breaking their arm on my watch. I take that personal. So if they even go ahead.
The reason that we put rules, or actually the board put rules on the King's move, it's not because it was an unfair move or it's an arm wrestling move. It was because it's a dangerous position. That's what the King's move is classified as, is a dangerous position. So naturally, if you go back to the vendetta that I had this past Saturday in Vegas, watch my show. I went way below the table, but I was way over on my side of the table. I was in the winning position, okay? So when I'm way down here like this, I'm still relatively tight, even though my shoulder's way below the table, I'm on the winning side. So I'm not in a dangerous position. Again, the King's move is being eliminated because it's a dangerous position. You get hurt doing it. Whereas if you're not in the positive position, if you're not on the winning side of the table, but you go back up to neutral, when your hand goes back up to the neutral position, well, then your arm starts straightening out. If your shoulder stays below the table and your arm starts straightening out, that's when you start getting into a dangerous position where you're going to get hurt. Then when it goes over to the losing side of the table, it's even more so of a dangerous position. So the rule book says when the shoulder goes below the the elbow pad. Mm-hmm. So if the shoulder goes below the elbow pad, that's what the ref's looking for. More than that, it's kind of, we're looking at the bicep. What makes it easier to gauge if it's a danger? The bicep. When the bicep is just going lateral with the floor, that's borderline. If the bicep muscle is going lateral with the floor, starts going parallel, if it starts going into a downward motion, when the bicep takes a downward motion, if you're in the neutral or the losing position, we give the command to come up. They have 2 seconds to come up. If they don't come up, we're going to stop the fight. We're going to literally reach up and grab the hands and pull it back to where somebody's not fixing to get hurt. We're going to stop the fight, issue a foul. If they don't understand why they got the foul, we're going to explain to them why they didn't get the foul. Why they got the foul. Then we're going to restart it. But again, the King's move, putting the sanctions on the King's move is simply to keep the puller safe.
Now, let's change gears for a second, because now we're going to talk about the flop wrist. And more oftentimes than not, some people will do that move, but then their shoulders cross that imaginary line in the center of the table, and they get shoulder fouled. And so there are tables that have that line going across where you can kind of go, okay, I can easily see that. However, there are tables that don't have that line. So at what point is that imaginary line from peg to peg? How do you determine as far as when to call a shoulder foul when they cross that zone?
Well, that's where the standards part comes in. That's why I believe every tournament should have to go by those standards. And that's why the athlete needs to know where they're competing at. Right. If I'm out there, I don't pull a whole lot of tournaments anymore. But if I was going to pull a tournament, I'm going to study on that tournament. I'm going to say, okay, what kind of refs do they have? What kind of tables are they using? And what's the rule set? You know, if they pretty much don't have, there may be some other tables out there. I know it seems like everybody in the world started making tables there for a little while. So there may be some other tables out there, but I know the Mazarenko table has the dot in the middle, and that's what we look at. The shoulder passes that dot, getting them lined up on the setup. We have to have them centered up over that dot. But none of the other tables that I've seen have anything like that. So it is then just comes down to the interpretation of the referee. To me, that's contentious. Then you're going to have the athlete has some bargaining power with the referee, or some arguing power with the referee, saying, no, how do you know my shoulder crossed them? There's nothing down here. How do you know? So you're going to get a lot of slack back and forth. Whereas if you have a line or that dot in the center of the table, that's what you use as that gauging bar. And that's why I have so many people. I don't know if you watch my referee, and I'm always center this way, center that way, center this way.
Oh yeah.
And then I have a lot of the competitors start to argue with me over that. No, I'm already too far over. I'm way on his side of the table now. I'm like, look down. So they're looking at that center dot and they're like, oh, okay. So without that, they just have too much bargaining power. But there's where the standards comes in. All the NFL use the same type of footballs. We need to use the same type of tables. Right. Since there are so many different orgs, again, the athlete just needs to pick and choose what event he competes at with the rule sets, the tables, and the referees.
Now, how about this one? And I hate to throw these questions out, but I think these are educational questions. So,
sure.
Parallel pins. And, the reason why, I'll tell you the reason why I became a ref, because first of all, there's not a whole lot of them out there. There's not a lot of them that are certified. And I know, when we have these practices and stuff, and you kind of need that kingpin, so to speak, to say, hey, if you have a big giant practice, which means if you got like 5, 6, 7 tables at a big practice, somebody's going to say, hey, if we're going to do this king of the table, whatever, then you need somebody to know what's going on so no one gets hurt, no one gets injured, and someone knows what's going on. Or, you go to a tournament and, hey, I'm going to go compete. Well, then that compete all of a sudden goes into like, I don't have enough rest. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll help you down ref. Just to kind of help, because I think sometimes the referees don't get the respect they deserve, because without the refs, you ain't having no legit arm wrestling tournament. That's just the way it is, right? So we'll use last year, 2021 Washington State Championships in Vancouver. And, it was in December last year, and I was just going to pull Jeff Frank. But after that, I was like, hey, Tim, if you need me to, I will help down ref. And I ended up down refing anyway. When we got to the open class, we had 3 tables. So I don't think people realize that referees are very important. So that's another reason why I want to ref. And, I think once my pulling days are all said and done, I can also phase into that to where, okay, I'm ready to roll. Now I can be a full-time ref. But a lot of people are confused, about the parallel pin. What determines the parallel pin? Is it fingers? Is it the wrist that goes below the pin pad? Explain that. And you got a pin line, which is the little shoestring, and a pin pad. Is there a difference? And then I'll have another question on that, but go ahead and answer that first.
On as far as the pin pad or the stringed line that goes across, I don't think that makes a difference whatsoever, because in the rules, the referee is not supposed to be standing at the end of the table. The referee is always supposed to be standing at the corner of the table. Right. So it don't matter if it was a shoestring or a pin pad whatsoever. That's not going to be directly in front of your eyes either way if you're standing in the correct position. Okay, so there's always going to be an imaginary line, whether it's a shoestring or the pin pads. There's always going to be an imaginary parallel line from the top of the pin pad to the top of the next pin pad. And when your pin is defined as the crook of your wrist, they bend your hand into a cup position, and you have that tip of your wrist. So anywhere from your wrist to your fingertips, if any point from your wrist to your fingertips either touches the pin pad or breaks that imaginary line, then it's a pin. So it could be your fingertips, it could be your knuckles, it could be the round part of your hand, or it could be your wrist. Anywhere from your wrist to your fingertip passes that imaginary line or touches the pin pad, it's a pin.
Got it. And here's a weird one, because depending on who makes what table, there are some pin pads that are higher than others, some pin pads that are lower than others. That's always a tricky one too. What may be a foul on one table may not be a foul on another table. How you decide that one?
There you go back to the standards, and you need to know what organization you're pulling with. Right. If you're pulling with USAA, if you're pulling a USAA event or a WAF event, IFA event, PAL event, Bill Collins,
UAL, yeah.
We're all using the same standards. Our tables are built pretty much the same as far as our pin pads and our elbow pads. The dimension of the table is a little bit different, but as far as the hand peg, the peg placement, the elbow pad height and size, diameter, the pin pad height and size, they're all universally the same. So you're going to get the same advantage. But now when you start getting over some other funky do things, you're getting up there pulling Deborah Larrett's lead that doesn't even have elbow pads, so you're again, it comes down to standards of the sport. And again, the competitors just needs to know what tournament he's pulling, what refs, what rule sets, what equipment they're using, things of that nature. Then, if you stick with the same ones, then you're going to get the same type of outcome. If you start moving around, then that's fine. You can go pull you a WAL tournament. Their elbow pads are a lot fluffier. They're a lot bigger. You're going to get away with a whole lot more, but you really need to understand you're not pulling an IFA event anymore. You're pulling a WAL event, so you got to understand the rules, because or if you don't, you're going to get screwed.
Yeah, because those pads seem to sink. You put your elbow in there, and they kind of sink, and it's like going, okay. So if you're a drag puller, it might be a little different, and it might be a little different. One more question. Go ahead.
When we went to, we used to practice here in Mississippi. We got a large team in Mississippi, and we used to practice all the time. We had combat tables we were practicing on. And when we left there and we're going to national, I think me and Rance Clayton, we went to nationals, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and several years ago. And I was fouling out like crazy. I'm like, what in the hell is going on? I figured out it was simply the difference in elbow pads. And that's exactly why Matt Mass was fouling out this past weekend. When you got that squishy elbow pad and you're used to being able to move your elbow a little bit and it not coming off the pad because the pad's so squishy, when you go to that hard pad, you don't have that room for play anymore. So again, you're setting yourself up to a disadvantage by a couple things. If you go into a tournament that has loose rules, or if you're practicing on tables that aren't like the ones that they use at any of these international events, if you're planning on pulling international events or world events, you need to be competing in tournaments that ref that way with equipment. And you need to be practicing on tables that like they use. If you're practicing on tables, on combat tables, and you go to compete on a Mazarenko table, you're going to elbow foul. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. When I went to Worlds last year in Florida, I knew that, okay, I had to get my mentally psyche ready for my elbows at least, because I knew those pads are a little bit more firm, and we'll use that word, firm, than the pads I'm probably used to pulling on at different events. So I knew that, okay, there may be some bunny hopping on my end. And luckily, all the matches I pulled only got one elbow foul. But then once I got fouled, I looked. I'm like, all right, cool. I know where to put my elbow at now. Now I'm already, ready to roll. Actually, no, I fouled out actually on my no, I did foul out on day 2. So I take that back. But I kind of knew that as far as bunny hopping, that wasn't going to be a factor. I got to put a little bit more, pressure on there to make sure I didn't elbow foul, whereas you don't have to do that as much on a squishy one. But like I said, to each his own. But the one last question I have for you, the straps, okay? And I came from an era where we had the Velcro straps. And I think Leonard was the only one I knew that can tighten them some bitches so tight in a Velcro way. However, when we start morphing over to the metal D-ring or the buckle, and then everybody start talking about, oh, I don't want to be on the buckle side. That's even the strategy now. And I'm like going, you know what? I never thought it was an issue till the more people talked about it, the more I thought, and then maybe it was just a psyche, but it didn't matter what, and then, hey, it's the Ferris strap. It needs to go in between rather than underneath. What's your experience with that as far as, is there advantage or disadvantage? Do you think so?
I used to back in before the Ferris strap system came. I believe it did give the advantage to the person without the buckle, just because whenever the buckle side is the side where it actually tightens down on. So when it went completely under both straps and it pulled down, it would pull the person with the buckle's hand in a little bit different position. And to me, it really would give the other person an advantage. I didn't care either which way, really, but I have seen it just time and time again. Back when it was done like that, the person, if the two competitors were close, then the person that won was the person without the buckle. The person with you take any two, and the person with the buckle, he lost the match. He switched to the other side of the table, he won the match. He switched to the buckle side, he lost the match. Switched to the other side without the buckle, he won the match. So it did seem like it definitely gave the competitor without the buckle an advantage then. But now with the Ferris strap, you don't see that. I just don't. I don't know if I've seen it at all with the Ferris strap system. But like I said, I don't care either which way. As long as I get in the strap, that's where I want to be. People talk about they don't like the buckle because it hurts their hand. Well, that just kind of makes me, a little bit more of a monster whenever I feel some pain digging in. I'm like, well, hell yeah, let's go. So, but to each his own. But to answer your question, yeah, I think back in the day that gave an advantage to the person without the buckle, but not so much at all anymore that I know of.
And not only that, but it's a strategy. So I'm sitting here on this screen talking to everybody. So everybody in live chat, watch how I do this. So let's say we're pulling right-handed, right? And I'm up here and the head ref is on my left-hand side. I'm going to make sure it's to the point where I will purposely slip to get into the strap because I know the buckle will be on my opponent's hand. Whereas if the roles were reversed and we're pulling right hand and the referee's on my right side going that way, I'm going to make sure I do not allow the slip because I know if we slip, the buckle will be on my hand now. So there is some strategy to all that. And like I say, it's evolved. Like we said, we talked about earlier, the sport has evolved, so we have to evolve with that. So for people who don't like the strap, then you might want to pay attention as far as what side of the table you on, because if you do slip, you got to think ahead. Okay, the buckle's on my side. If you don't like that, it might be problems for you. But with the Ferris strap, it kind of eliminates all that. Now, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say now that does it plays into their mind. Now, when you got to remember too, when you're walking up to the table, if you're on the side of the table that you don't want to be on, you always have an opportunity to say, "I need to flip for sides." Or in any tournament, they might use a coin, they might use their fingers, pick a finger, whatever. But you can kind of ask to choose a side. And now that's the first time going up. If you go up against that competitor the next time, then you have to choose the opposite side that you pulled the first time. But now what I'll do a lot of times, even though I do not care if the buckle's on my hand or not, I know that that's still taught even in clubs with the Ferris strap system. There's clubs still teaching you want to be on the side. You don't want the buckle in your hand. Like I said, even though it's not a big a thing anymore, I don't think it does anything anymore. It's still being taught to people. So I still want to put the buckle on their hand for no other reason, just to get inside their head a little bit. Because now they're over there with the buckle in their hand, so they're already psyching themselves out. Oh shit, man, I got the buckle in my hand. I'm fixing to, I'm going to have a disadvantage. For that reason alone, I want to give the other guy the buckle in his hand.
Well, I mean, this goes back to what Tim Bresson said years ago. Eventually, you're going to get the buckle on your hand at some point. The longer you pull, you will get the buckle on your hand. That's just the way it is. So, yeah, I mean, for me, my group I train with, I always, for the most part, I have the buckle on my side of the hand. But it doesn't bother me because I have a certain style for when the buckle is on my hand. So I don't panic. I don't push the panic button because I know, all right, we slip and the buckle's on my hand. I got a certain style for that. So it doesn't really put me at a disadvantage, It kind of helps me out. But either way, I think it's one of those things that we all need to train. That way, when we do get to a elite status, or we do get to a higher tournament, say like a PAO event or a Nemiroff, Worlds, Nationals, by the way, Irving, Texas in June, if you check in, you'll know how to pull that and understand that. That way you don't, feel like I'm getting screwed. You know what I mean?
Well, and then the one other thing, I just thought about something as far as the buckle being on your hand. It does, if you don't watch it, if you don't watch out, the referee, when he pulls the strap down, that buckle's on your hand, but since he's pulling that buckle and that strap down on your hand, that automatically puts some pressure on your hand. And if you don't watch it, your hand's going to start going down a little bit below the competitor's hand, which is going to make your competitor higher. Right. So you have to make sure you keep your hand forced up because, like I said, the referee is pulling that strap down on your hand, and your hand your hand is what's feeling the pressure, and it's wanting to go. Gravity's wanting to take your hand down. So make sure you're pushing your hand up through that strap as he tightens the strap, so you don't get down. So your hand's not lower than your competitor. I actually love this strap whenever it's going to my hand because it's like the ref can't see me driving my hand through the strap as he tightens it because he's over here tightening it. And I'm just driving up. I'm driving my hand straight up, and I'm getting the strap then down real close to my thumb knuckle, real close in that crease right there.
Right. So, guys, I mean, today was so good for a change. It was more educational than this interview was, and so I'm glad, Sean, you're able to come on so we can kind of explain some of that because there's some things that some of the guys didn't know. A lot of people in the chat probably know of the majority of this stuff, but there's a few things that we kind of know going forward that like the King's move. If by all God I happen to be in that move, at what point am I okay to pull? At what point I need to stand up? That was informative. The shoulder press. If somebody wants to shoulder press, flop, or whatever, I need to know. Okay, if I have a table with no middle line, I got to know, for example, okay, where are my boundaries at? So I think by you explaining that to everybody made some sense, and I think it was very informative. I want to thank you for that.
Yep. One of them, the last thing in closing is, I think we got on this just because we had so many comments about the sport will not grow under rigid rules. Again, I want to drive home that the U.S. has gone with this whole deal of loose rules pretty much since the existence of arm wrestling, professional arm wrestling in the U.S. has used loose rules. And if the sport was ever going to grow with a loose rule system, it would have already done it. The one thing that we have not done in the U.S. is what they're doing in Europe. The rigid rules and the strict standards. We're finally starting to do that here. Again, if there was going to ever grow under the loose rules, it would have already happened. It's growing over in Europe under the rigid rules. So we're going to do that here. If you don't think it's going to work here, that's fine. Keep on going to the backyard terms and pulling loose rules all you want to. But we're going to bring the sport in the U.S. like it is over in Europe by using rigid rules and strict standards.
There you go. Hey, Sean, thank you for joining me and kind of breaking everything down. I mean, since you were there at the tournament and you were involved in the tournament some way, shape, or form, whether you were reffing or pulling, I want to thank you for joining me on the show and explaining all this. And I'll make sure I'll go ahead and post that on Facebook so everybody can see that in case they missed it today because they're at work or whatnot. But I do want to thank you for joining me on the show and talking about this.
Yes, sir, brother. I love you. God bless you and your family. Pray for you constantly all the time. And thank you for being what you are in the sport.
Thank you, sir. And I thank you very much. And we'll keep in touch, my friend.
All right, dog. We'll holler at you.
Take care. So that was Sean Hancock. And I'm telling you right now, that was very informative, I think. I'm going to make sure I post this on there because it was very interesting to know because, like I said, if someone happens to go shoulder press, how far can I push forward before, hey, your shoulder's crossing the line, shoulder foul? That's happened to me before in the past, right? So now I have to adjust that move, King's move. At what point do I need to my side of the table or is it his side of the table? What? If it's my side of the table, as you know, look how my arm is, as opposed to if I'm on his side of the table, he talked about the bicep, right? So, for that alone, the rigid rules, I think for the most part, reduces the risk of injuries. As far as arm breaks, I think it does. When you have everybody going all crazy and stuff, you're pushing the envelope where you get more of that stuff can happen on the possibility. But all in all, my opinion, I like both, but I know that if I go to a wall event, I have to get in my brain. I got to prepare for that. Thumbs down, close your hands, go. Whereas, here it's get a grip. All right, I got my grip. I'm ready to roll. So I have to do that, which means all pullers got to get their mind right, okay? Because it's our responsibility to know what organization I'm going to. Even down to the cadence, right? This organization may say, hey, don't move, go. Whereas this organization may say, ready, go, right? All different, depending on what organization you go to. So just kind of food for thought. Keep that in mind. But hey, it's Friday. The sun was out today here in Central Oregon. It snowed the other day. So I'm glad we got blue skies. Cool. I like that. Thanks, everybody, for joining me on the show today. This was very informative. And I will be in Arizona next weekend for the Arizona State Championships because guess what? Your boy is commentating the pay-per-view with all the super matches with my tag team partner for the day, Don Underwood. That's going to be fun. But I'll go ahead and put some stuff on my YouTube channel about when I get down there. We're going to have some fun. So it's Friday. I know a lot of us got either tournaments or practices tomorrow. So enjoy the rest of your day. And as always, I will see you when I see you. Be nice to each other. Take care.